All right, today we're going to unpack one of the most disturbing and frankly complicated scandals in recent memory. The whole story of Jeffrey Epstein. You know, it's this crazy mix of incredible wealth, untouchable power, and a truly horrific secret that was hiding out in the open on what looked like a perfect island paradise.
So the whole thing really centers on this one place, an island called Little St. James, and it had these two completely different realities. On one hand, you've got this picture of heaven, right? A private getaway for the super rich and famous. But then, there's the other side. Behind all the luxury, it was a living nightmare. The people who lived nearby had a name for it, Pedophile Island. It was basically a prison where young girls were trapped with absolutely no way out.
So you have to ask, right? How on earth does something like this even happen? Well, to get it, we really need to look at the guy at the center of it all, Jeffrey Epstein himself, and this horrifyingly brilliant system he created to carry out his crimes.
Okay, so Epstein's backstory is, well, it's pretty wild. Believe it or not, this guy started out as a high school math teacher. Then, somehow, he makes this leap into being a financial advisor for billionaires. We're talking about a fortune of over $500 million. And with that kind of money, he didn't just buy stuff, he bought access. Access to the most powerful people in the world. We're talking presidents, princes, you name it.
And how he ran his criminal operation, it was just chillingly smart. It wasn't just about brute force. It was this twisted, manipulative pyramid scheme. Here's how it worked. Young girls, some as young as 14, would be brought in for so-called massages. After they were abused, they'd get paid extra to recruit their own friends. And then those friends would be pressured to bring in their friends. It created this constant, horrible supply chain of victims.
Now, eventually the law did catch up, and for a second there, it really looked like justice was about to be served. But, and this is a huge but, the very system that was supposed to protect these girls, it was about to fail them in the most spectacular way.
So the whole thing started to unravel back in 2005, and it all began with one complaint from a 14-year-old girl in Florida, just one person speaking up. But that one brave voice opened the floodgates. Within a year, local cops had found dozens more victims, and that's when the FBI jumped in with a huge investigation they called Operation Leap Year. And the sheer scale of this, it was just staggering. Just the first police investigation in Palm Beach, just that one, they found over 36 underage victims. The investigator said it was a horrifying pattern. Every single girl they interviewed would lead them to 2 more. It was this chain that just seemed to have no end.
And listen to this quote from one of the victims. It just perfectly captures the sick strategy behind it all. They weren't just finding random girls. No, Epstein and his whole network, they were predators. They were specifically looking for girls who were vulnerable, and they used those vulnerabilities to trap them.
So after this massive federal investigation, dozens of victims coming forward, what was the punishment? Get this, just 18 months. And you can barely even call it prison. He was in a private wing of the jail, and he got work release. That meant he could leave for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to go back to his fancy office. Unbelievable.
So you're probably wondering, how in the world is a sentence like that even possible? Well, it all came down to a secret deal, a non-prosecution agreement cooked up by a federal attorney named Alexander Acosta. This deal not only gave Epstein that ridiculously short sentence, but it also gave full immunity from all federal charges to him and all of his co-conspirators. And the worst part? The deal was sealed and illegally kept secret from the victims themselves, so they never even got their day in court.
And just like that, for almost 10 years, the story just went away. Epstein was out, living his life of luxury like nothing had happened. It really looked like the bad guy got away with it. But one person, one journalist, was not about to let this story die.
And that person was Julie K. Brown, an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. She spent years digging into this cold case, finding victims who had been ignored, and uncovering the truth about that secret plea deal. Then, in 2018, she drops this bombshell series called Perversion of Justice, and it just created this massive public explosion, with everyone demanding that something be done.
And the public pressure from her reporting was huge. And it worked. In July of 2019, federal prosecutors in New York arrested Jeffrey Epstein all over again. But this time the charges were much, much more serious. Federal sex trafficking. He was looking at a possible 45 years in prison. It finally felt like real justice was actually going to happen.
But then, just a month after he was arrested, before he could ever stand trial, the story took its most shocking turn yet.
On August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. The official report said it was a suicide. But, as you can imagine, conspiracy theories just exploded overnight. I mean, think about it. With all the powerful people he was connected to, a lot of people started to believe he was silenced, to keep their secrets buried forever.
So Epstein's death just poured fuel on the fire. The public demand to see the Epstein files, which is basically all the court documents that people believed held the names of his powerful friends, it just went through the roof. And the whole thing got super political. For instance, Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail to release all the files, but then his administration later kind of brushed it off as a hoax. In the end, it took pressure from both sides of the aisle in Congress to finally force some of those documents to be unsealed.
So, what was actually in those files that got released? Well, what we saw was explosive for sure, but also incredibly frustratingly incomplete. Okay, first thing you have to get is that releasing the files wasn't as simple as it sounds. It's not like they just opened up a filing cabinet. The public got to see only a tiny, tiny piece of the whole puzzle. And even the stuff we did see was heavily, heavily redacted. Just black bars over names, dates, whole paragraphs. Now, those documents did have some very famous names in them, but it is so important to remember these are just mentions and allegations from court documents, okay? Not proof of guilt or convictions. So we saw names like Prince Andrew and Stephen Hawking mentioned as guests on the island. Bill Clinton was noted as a friend, and Donald Trump was mentioned in one document with an allegation that he knew about the girls. And here's something that was kind of a surprise, at least based on what was in the released part of the files. For years, a lot of the talk had been about people like Bill Clinton. But the documents that were actually made public, they had way more mentions and specific details connected to Donald Trump. And some of the details in these specific documents were pretty shocking. For example, one filing had an FBI memo about a limo driver who claimed he overheard a conversation that involved Trump. Another document was a letter, supposedly from another sex offender to Epstein, that had the line, "Our president also loves young girls like us." But all this, everything we've talked about, it brings us to maybe the most important point of all. What we've seen so far, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There are still an estimated 1 million plus documents from this case that are totally sealed, completely hidden from you and me. And that just leaves us with this massive, unanswered question, right? With more than 1 million documents still locked away, what other names are in there? What other crimes? What other secrets are just sitting there waiting to come out? For now, the complete truth is still a secret.